right, let's see how to sew a button that has a shank. You'll see that I'm starting with my button, a needle, a little piece of fabric to go on the back, a toothpick, thread, my fabric, and I have my button placement marked here on my fabric. Now the first thing I have to do, obviously, is to thread my needle. That might be the hardest part of this whole operation. If you think it looks blurry on your screen, well, that's exactly how it is for me. Anyway, once I've got the thread through the eye of the needle, I'm putting the two ends together, wrapping them around my index, rolling a bit, pulling towards the end, and then just straightening out the ends a little bit. And with my handy dandy pointy little scissors, I'm going to snip off the excess. All right, let's bring my fabric in, and I'm going to come up from the underneath, right in the middle of my button placement, in the middle of my cross, there at the cross point. All right, bring it up. I'm going to go down on the side that's towards me. I'm putting that second piece of fabric, that little square, it's about 2 centimeters square, on the back because my fabric is a thin cotton and it's not sturdy enough, I don't think, for the button. So as you see, I've gone down on the side towards me and come back up on the side that's away from me. And I'm just pulling my threads through to make sure that I don't have any knots or loops that are going to pose a problem later. Now my button coming up on the top side, down on the bottom side. That's going to be our rule. Down on the bottom, up on the top. So here I'm going to go down on the side towards me of the cross, and then when I come back up, I'll come up on the top side. But before I do that, I'm going to take my toothpick and slide it between the thread and the button, and that's what's going to give me that extra little bit of thread that I need to create the shank that's going to keep the button popped up a little bit off the surface of my fabric. So coming back up on the top, pulling up the thread all the way up, down through the bottom, and pulling it snug over the toothpick. And this I'm going to repeat several times. I've done it 5 or 6 times, and here I've actually sped the film up a little tiny bit. I don't really sew that fast. There, up and down, just enough times that you think that it's going to hold. 5 or 6 times for me is ample, especially since I've got a double thread here. Now the last time when I come up, my needle's going to come up between the button and the fabric, you see? So I'm going to pull the needle through, and once I have the needle through, I'm going to pinch the fabric with my left hand, pull the toothpick out with my right, and then push the button up right towards the end of the loop part of the thread, and then wrap around. I'm creating my shank, so wrapping my thread around, and now I'll pull it back down to the underside to make the knots. And I tend to knot several times. I don't like buttons to come off. You'll see that I'm doing this in the evening. I've got a little moth flying around there. So I'm going around, look, sliding my needle under, not pulling it all the way through, and then pushing the needle through the loop a couple of times to make the knot. And I do that 2 or 3 times. So there, my thread is well knotted. I'm going to take my scissors, snip it off, but I leave about 1 centimeter there. I don't want to snip it off too tight. I always leave a little tiny bit. And there, now I'm going to try to show you that from the profile so that you can see that the button is in fact pushed up off the surface of the fabric by 1 millimeter or 2, roughly. And that's going to allow the button to sit flat once I have the loop behind it. There you go. Now you know how to sew a button with a shank.